this area is in the field of multiple intelligences, and in particular, the field of spiritual intelligence, which I have attempted to pioneer. And you'll see on the slide here that we're talking about the ability to become compassionate, wise, and peaceful, no matter what the situation. So that's where we're headed. Let me start with a hypothesis that perhaps it's true that your life experience is somewhat similar to mine. I have experienced that life is amazing and miraculous and beautiful beyond words at certain times. Have you had that experience? I have also experienced that life is occasionally a problem. There are moments of deep sadness and grief in all of our lives. And how do we cope with all of that range of reality? How do we be truly present to what is magnificent and beautiful and cope with what is tragic? And so I would postulate that we need more than IQ to address the difficulties of life. Now, I like to joke that I popped out of the womb a Myers-Briggs thinking style person. If you know what that means, it means that when I first got exposed to Star Trek, I thought the Vulcans had it figured out. Logic was the answer, emotions were the problem. So I set about my life developing my IQ. I went to Duke University for my bachelor's and master's degree, and I got out of that program with great grades, went to work for a major oil company, and was among my people. You know, a lot of engineers, hyper-educated. But the interesting thing that started happening was I started getting feedback about my interpersonal skills. Now, when a group of engineers start telling you need to work on your interpersonal skills, it's potentially true. So initially, I resisted this feedback, but after I consistently received it, I started thinking, well, maybe there's something here. And at that time, unfortunately, the field of emotional intelligence had not yet been well developed and published. It was in development, but the materials had not been published. So I had to kind of fumble through figuring out what was this thing that we now call emotional intelligence. And Winji did a fabulous job of walking us through what is an amygdala and an amygdala hijack and the neuroscience involved in our emotions. Now, when I was doing my Vulcan game, I had very low emotional self-awareness, which you see on this slide is the first listed skill of emotional intelligence. This is the research of Daniel Goleman and Richard Boyatzis, and their research now shows us that there are 18 skills. Different researchers describe them differently, but the ones I've highlighted in yellow are the most crucial. Emotional self-awareness in the first quadrant means I can name my emotion at the time that I'm feeling it and I understand what triggered it. So being a Vulcan, I was believing that I was not feeling anger. Do you think that was actually true? No. So what do people do with their anger when they're pretending they're not having it? You stuff it. What happens when you stuff your emotions? Bad things happen. You tend to either explode in inappropriate moments or you introvert all that energy and make yourself sick. I was managing to do both. I managed to give myself an ulcer and to go from either too robotic to too hot in a meeting. So I was kind of not well calibrated, which relates to the skill in the lower left-hand quadrant of emotional self-control. I was not well calibrated emotionally. Now, if I am not able to understand my emotions or manage my emotions well, how do you think I'm going to do at handling conflict? Not very well. You'll see in the lower right-hand quadrant are the social skills that Goleman and Boyatzis have identified, and conflict management is one of them, teamwork and collaboration. Communication is not actually one of their listed skills. I just put it there to point out that good communication skills is an outcome here. The actual list of skills doesn't include that. But good change management, inspirational leaders, ability to influence others. So it comes from these three primary skills in yellow plus others. So can I understand my own emotions? Do I have empathy with yours? If I don't understand mine, I'm not going to have good emotional intelligence about yours. And do I manage myself appropriately? This was my first huge hurt in life, was learning to deal with these things. And so over time, I developed better emotional intelligence. Then what I found was that there's this whole world of multiple intelligences, and that there were really 4 intelligences that were essential for my personal and professional success. And this is now the foundation of my executive coaching practice, which is we need to have physical intelligence. Do we take care of our bodies? Are we aware of it? Things like getting enough sleep become really important. And what I have come to appreciate is that when I'm sleep deprived, my IQ, EQ, and spiritual intelligence all suffer. So these intelligences are interdependent. They develop somewhat separately, but they have strong interdependencies. This is why a practice like yoga can have profound effect on people's ability to think clearly, ability to handle their interpersonal skills well, and ability to manage their spiritual intelligence, which I'm going to talk about now. So let's talk about spiritual intelligence. When I ask people, who do you think of when I say think of spiritual exemplars, there are certain names that come to people's mind. People like Jesus, Buddha, Mohammed, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, the Dalai Lama, Aung San Suu Kyi. People like that will tend to be listed again and again and again. And I will ask people to talk about the character traits that cause them to admire these exemplary people. And it will include things like courageous, humble, loving, passionately committed to their purpose, things like that. And they'll go on. And these lists of character traits will have very high resonance from one group to another. I've done this with thousands of people now. What it tells me is that collectively we know what spiritual intelligence looks like. But there's been not much research around it. Now, this aha moment occurred to me at a time in my career when, thanks to the grace of having a 2x4 hit me up the side of the head at exactly the right moment, I actually did something really effective in my own leadership style, which was shut up and listen. It was deeply impactful when I realized that when I got my ego out of the way, I could hear things I never heard before. And I realized that my own spiritual practices that I had been working on for decades were finally coming to fruition in my leadership skills. And I thought to myself, this is incredibly relevant information. And I work in HR. We do executive development, and we can't talk about this because of the diversity concerns. So we needed a psychologically sound, logical, because I'm a Vulcan, faith-neutral but faith-friendly way of talking about spiritual skills, things that are highly relevant to us to deal with our lives, but that we could learn and we could talk about in a corporate setting without causing all kinds of problems because of differences around belief. So I set about defining what is spiritual intelligence in a way that would be faith-neutral but faith-friendly. The first thing I wanted to do was include a definition of spiritual intelligence that included the word love, because when you talk about these exemplars, many people will talk about the importance of love. They're loving people. But love in the English language is a very sloppy word. We say, I love my children and I love ice cream. Okay. Now, I'm all for Haagen-Dazs and Baskin-Robbins, but it's not the same thing. I found a definition in the Eastern religions that was very powerful for me, that love is a bird with 2 wings. One wing is compassion, the other wing is wisdom. If either wing is broken, the bird cannot fly. Gave me goosebumps from head to toe when I found it, because it's the best of the head, wisdom, the best of the heart, compassion, coming together. From that, you find this definition, which I then created, that spiritual intelligence is the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace, regardless of the situation. Is this desirable? Well, it is for me. And for me, the big distinction from EQ to SQ is that we're able to maintain our peace from the inside out. It is far less exhausting if we can remove the trigger of anger. EQ helps us manage our triggers. SQ helps us remove our triggers. I have created a very detailed model of 21 skills of spiritual intelligence. Obviously, this is too detailed for you to read here, but there's a handout that'll be available at the table at the break up in the back that I'll make available with this list and the EQ list of skills. Every one of these skills has been described in 5 levels. I'm trying to advance here. Let's try one more time. There we go. Oops. Back up. There we go. 5 levels from novice, level 1, to expert, level 5. This is a critical skill, being aware that we have an ego self and a higher self, and being able to listen to the voice of our higher self. At level 1, we just know that we have an ego. By level 3, I recognize the situations that trigger my ego. By level 5, my ego is in joyful service to my higher self. This is where we're going. This is generic language that works across all the religions and with secular humanists. I've even worked with communist atheists with this language. When I talk about compassion, it is one step above empathy. You start with apathy, which is I don't care. You start with go to sympathy, which is I kind of feel sorry for you. You move to empathy, which is I feel with you. And then you move to compassion, which is different. There is some lovely research in this book called The Emotional Life of the Brain that talks about how compassion is different from empathy. Empathy is where you get tangled up in another person's emotions, and it can be overwhelming, and it can especially be overwhelming in a healthcare setting. Compassion in an MRI shows up without activation of the distress circuit. You're feeling all the same feelings, except you are not feeling distress. So it's a wonderful spiritual maturity to get to. To end with this, I'd like to say a couple of quick tips, 2 more slides. Humble curiosity is the best tip I can offer you. The flexibility that children have to turn the world upside down and look at it differently is a fantastic spiritual skill. When we can see through the eyes of another person, we can truly develop compassion and wisdom. And in service of that, I have developed for me the most powerful question in my pursuit for my own spiritual intelligence. And that question is, when someone does something really irritating or upsetting, I ask myself, what would it take for me to do the exact same behavior that this person just did? Now, the ego will immediately respond and say, I would never do that. And I have to push back on it from the voice of my higher self and say, if he would do it, if she would do it, I too could do it if the situation was reversed. If I had the same biology, if I had the same upbringing, if I had all of the same life conditions that this person has, I too could be doing this same behavior. It's not to say the behavior's okay, but it is to say that I can now see it differently with less judgment, and I can come to a compassionate, wise, and peaceful solution. Thank you very much.